The Adventures of Pinocchio is probably a film I would have watched eventually anyway, because I do like Pinocchio stories. But Bebe Neuwirth is in this, so that was a really good reason to prioritise it. And I'm pleased to say I rather enjoyed it. It's probably never going to be my all-time favourite Pinocchio, but if you like the story of Pinocchio and you're looking for a version you maybe haven't seen, this is a pretty decent one to go with. It was released in 1966. It's directed by Steve Barron and it's written by Sherry Mills, Steve Barron, Tom Benedek, and Barry Berman. I can't really say how close it is to the novel, to the original story, because I've never actually read it. And I feel like I probably should at some point because I've seen a lot of adaptations and I can never comment on how true they are to the story. But compared to other versions, other adaptations, it is a pretty classic representation of the story. We have Martin Landau as Geppetto and Jonathan Taylor Thomas as the voice of Pinocchio. And I won't go into too much detail about the story. I'm going to assume that if you're watching this, you're aware of the story. But very briefly, Geppetto carves a wooden boy, and at the beginning of the film, he comes to life. He is still made out of wood, but he is able to move and speak. And he gets into some difficult situations, and he meets a cricket who acts as his conscience, who is there to try and help him. And there are a lot of lessons, a lot of messages. One of the strong ones in this is don't be a jackass, which I can't say this for certain, but I don't know if I've ever heard them use the word jackass in any other Pinocchio versions before. They may well have done, but I found it amusing. And obviously the big lesson is don't lie, because if you do, your nose will grow like Pinocchio's. And it's a really beautiful story, and it's scary. Something I find about pretty much every Pinocchio is that, at least when it's done right, is that there are some pretty scary scenes. Pinocchio is a pretty scary film, and the Disney's version is by far the most terrifying. It just mentally scarred me as a child. Even now, I find it difficult to watch because it reminds me of that fear I felt as a child when watching it. But this one definitely has some pretty scary moments. I think they did a really great job with the story. The pacing is quite strange because it was very slow to begin with. And then I felt like it was too quick. I feel like it was rushing through things a little bit too much. And then I'd say maybe the second half, certainly the final third, the pacing was much better. So it does get better as it goes along. With regards to the character of Pinocchio, I love the design of him. I really believe it. He looks like he's been carved out of wood. I say that because there are some versions where it doesn't feel believable. He doesn't look like he's necessarily carved out of wood. It doesn't look like what I'd imagine he'd look like. But the movements and everything, absolutely fantastic. Really brilliant job. I apologise if you can hear my cat meowing. I think she wants some food today. Usually she's meowing because there's a bird outside, but I think she's wanting some treats. So I will go and sort my cat out, and I will leave you with the final thoughts that The Adventures of Pinocchio is a really good film. I think it's a decent version of the story. Bebe Neuwirth is great in this. I love her hair. I love her costume. Absolutely fantastic. I still would have enjoyed it as much, though, even if she hadn't been in it. I think it's a really good adaptation. Well, as I said, I haven't read it, but it's compared to other adaptations, I think they did a really good job with it. And if you're looking for a Pinocchio that you haven't seen, and you haven't seen this, I'd say it's definitely worth watching. If you've never seen any Pinocchio, it wouldn't be the first one I recommend, but at the same time, it's a good introduction to the story nevertheless. So either way, I think The Adventures of Pinocchio is definitely worth watching. It's a version of Pinocchio that I definitely enjoyed.